Hello everyone, welcome again to our last part, the part 7 on this series on the syntropic, fundamental principles of syntropic agroforestry. So today in this last session we'll be talking about the Elemental Mandala, and I hope that it brings it all into a close somehow. I'm definitely getting out of my depth here. The Elemental Mandala is something that I haven't really been working with for a long time. It's something that I've been listening and hearing a lot about, especially through the work of Dennis Klocek, which is somebody that I really admire his work. But I see great potential. I see really great potential, especially because in syntropic agroforestry we are dealing with life forces. We are dealing with life growing. We are dealing with life movement. It's all about this dynamic interaction, that movement through time. And movement through time, it's one of the things that are most difficult for us, for me at least, to follow through. Because, we don't really follow time. We follow space very well, but time, I think it kind of falls into a void sometimes. And the mandala does then provide us with a tool, really, that allow us to understand movement in the natural world and also understand movement within ourselves. So it's a great tool that brings all of those processes that I've been talking about potentially together. And there is a phrase from Seth Mill, who to me encompasses the power of that tool. And basically it says that the Elemental Mandala is not to obtain answers, but is to sensitize ourselves to the subtleties of the range of potential in the phenomena. It objectifies our consciousness, smooths our tendencies towards one-sidedness. It also opens the possibility for change, allowing a deeper entry into the complex phenomena, and provides continual feedback about our own evolution. So to me that's a very, very powerful synthesis that brings a lot into this equation and a lot of potential really on how can we get into those phenomena and really understand the phenomena from within. So there will be 4 parts. So the idea of this presentation is, I'm also grasping on the subject, but to provide a presentation where we kind of move together through earth, water, air and fire in the way that I'll do that presentation. All right, so let's kick off. So, with the first part, let's just try and define it. Let's just be clinical about what we mean by those. What are the difference between those elements? Because we have to see that those elements really, what they bring is, a description of the various states of being. It perhaps a better way of putting it, there are different forces. They indicate different processes behind natures. And we got to understand as well, and that will be perhaps more clear towards the end, is that it is a cyclical, it is a spiral of refinement. And every time that cycle goes around, just like in a syntropic system, every time we go through the processes and we get better and richer with a higher quantity and quality of life. So that's really the idea, is a never-ending process that really provides this context for us to understand the movement and those tendencies, and then we can align ourselves with that, with our consciousness, with the movement of the natural world, and then guess what? We can act in a naturally lawful way, which to me is really, really powerful. All right, so the earth element, what are we talking about? We are talking about things that are what? Things that are solid. They are really well defined. They have boundaries. They are, however, static. The earth qualities, they don't really move very freely. They do resist change. That's a very characteristic of that earth part of the mandala. that bottom part of the mandala. But it also brings what? It brings uniqueness, it brings individualization, it brings manifestation. So on the water side of the mandala, then we're talking about what? We're talking about this fluid nature. So it's everything that flows. It's not just water. It's everything that flows. It's the sap, it's the blood, it's all of those liquid forms that are flowing. So basically, it doesn't have any form. It is formless. It also moves, however, in a rhythm. So water just loves to move in a rhythm. It has its own dances. It doesn't have form, but it tends to conform to a vessel, to something that gives it boundaries. So water is very conforming. It also then relates, it's about relationships. It's not so much about uniqueness, but it's about relationships. In terms of air, it's everything that's gas, everything that is a gaseous formation. Gas are what? They are intangible. Basically, they are everywhere, but they are nowhere. You can't really see it, really. It is, however, the way it moves in a chaotic fashion. It also tends to be all-encompassing. It's everywhere within that atmosphere. It just goes all the way up and all the way down. It's all-encompassing. And it does tend then to look into polarity. And finally, fire is about warmth. It is what? It is unlimited. It is dynamic. It's always moving with an order. It is then able to provide a transformative power. And it's usually looking at the whole. So at the earth level of this mandala, we are basically just looking at little bits that are just data sets, that are just points. Basically, Earth is solid, is defined, and that's what I've tried to do here. Just very quickly, just define what each of those elements are, basically, and which some characteristics of their forces. It's the beginning. We are collecting some facts. We're starting to move it forward. And facts are great because allow us then to build on it. But it's always problematic. If we only stay on that level, on the earth level of living, it's not really living. It's just dead. It's final, it's separate, it's concluded, it's got a boundary, and this is it. So it really resists to change. And if it's resisting to changing, then it's not really alive. So we can perhaps depict a similar sort of information, perhaps in a more fluid manner, in a more water level of exchange. So basically the mandala can help us then to look at those different levels. So earth relates to earth, water relates to the moon, air relates to the sun, and fire relates to the planets. So now we're starting to observe the different stages in the evolution of the planet, where it moved from Saturn to Sun to Moon and to Earth to manifestation. We can also look at the mandala and how they get connected. The earth is the mineral, is that solid foundation. But then we have life, we have plants that come up. From plants, we also start to get something different. We've got animals. And animals, we've got humans. So one of the beautiful qualities of that mandala is that really allow us to bring into recognition, into a harmony on how those distinct kingdoms come together and their strengths and their weakness. It's not that fire is better than air, that air is better than water. No, they are all together, but they are all in a constant transformation. One moves into the other, that moves into the other, that moves into the other. It's the same principle moving to different states of being. So we can bring it closer to our sciences. So basically the earth level in the science is studying physics. And then we can move in water, where we start to talk about chemistry, about how those things are interacting. And then we move into the higher level, into talking about biology. And then finally, what we're actually doing in Syntropic is we're talking about ecology. So we see that the final part tends to incorporate all of the others. So the fire side, the warmth side, is within all of them. So the fire is the whole. It transforms, it's dynamic, and it's what tends to be the one that interpenetrates everybody else. So without warmth, no life. Without air, no life. Without water, no life. Without earth, no life. But they need to be working together. So bringing here into Syntropic, we can go and follow a similar process where our earth stage is best soil. We gotta work with that. We gotta move. What's the next step then from our best soil? We start to colonize. We start to bring our attention. We start to bring those plants that are hardy, that can really handle the current conditions. Once we start to colonize and life starts to move, then we move into what? We move into accumulation. So now we are able to accumulate. And why do we accumulate? Through accumulation, we are then able to take it to the next level, to the level of abundance, where we are producing, we are regenerating, we are humanizing, we are bringing it all together. So for me, what I relate then into the next stage on how I teach, on how I find it important that we keep working in those cycles, is that we must design. Design is the first step. It's when we bring all of those bits into action. But then we need to see how those bits flow, is contextualized, it's held in our own environment. So what do you need to do? We move into the implementation. Okay, so how are we going to put it together? We have this beautiful design. Can we actually implement it? So we now brought a linearity, we brought some relationships into all those different bits, which first, yes, there was in the design, but really in the implementation is where it all comes alive. And then we need to work with the next stage, the polarity. Can we imagine? Can we understand? Can we observe what's happening? Because if we don't do that, if we don't flip from our static design into observing the polarity, what's actually happening on the other side, what's coming out of our papers, then we don't do much. But once we observe, then we move into management. So again, we can start to understand that there is a process behind the process, behind the process. So we can then take that to the next level. So here again, we have an earth level, just data bits, just information, cold, solid, impenetrable. And then we start to find relationships. We start to move into the water level of the mandala. So we start to see within a limited boundary, so within Earth's evolution, within the major kingdoms, within our sciences, within syntropic practice, and within perhaps syntropic theory. So small boundaries, but we start to connect those qualities together within. So we can take it now to the next level, to the earth level perhaps, to the air level of our interactions, and we can start now to investigate a little bit deeper, perhaps our human cognition. How those four elements with those qualities help us to move about. So at the very earth level, then we can start with the very simple question, what? So what questions are earth questions? We are trying to understand those basic data sets, those basic bits that allow us to move forward. So once we asked what, then we can ask what? We can ask how. So now we are looking for relationships between those data bits. What is this? How are they related? And then we get a bit stuck and we start to use our consciousness and our higher capacities for what? To move it further, to flip it, to understand even deeper why. What if? So now we start to expand all the way to the periphery. And it's kind of gonna be like, ooh, it might get a little bit too big. But by doing that exercise, something happens. and then the fire comes along and it does a little bit of cooking, it warms it up, and then in the end we are asking who. So those questions that we got to go through in our systems and also in our lives and in our relationships really allow, are we somebody that is only asking what? And we just want to what, and we're just going to deliver facts? Or do we really get flighty and everything is possible and, the world is unlimited, and then we get lost because we don't really know what to do? So important questions, very different energies behind each of those questions. So basically behind the what question is we are looking for form. So we are looking for definite things, tangible, solid things that we can do. When we're looking at how, we're now looking for movement. We are trying to see how are those things moving within that context. So from that, when we start to ask what if and why, guess what? We start to have ideas. So the idea realm now goes all the way to the air, all the way to periphery. And then something happens. The fire burns the rubbish, and we get what? We go, all right, I know what I'm doing. I'm acting. So similar process. We observe there, we connect, we have ideas, we act. But that act must come back. That action must come back into that form, into that earth. So again, expanding on human cognition, the word of the earth is the word of what we know. And it's comfortable, it's solid, it's predictable. It's physics. We know it, yes. But we gotta move along. We gotta keep on moving. So from knowing, we start to feel. Once we go out and we implement our systems, now we have a feeling. We put it out there. Woohoo! Now it's open to interpretation. So all of a sudden, what we think we know and we felt, we start to inhabit our realm where it's kind of unknown. And things start to get a little bit, do I actually know anything? Because the more we know that we don't know. It's quite interesting. But all of a sudden, guess what? We find meaning. And that's even more powerful when we start to go again from things that I know, but then I put it into action, or I ask a question, or I share with somebody, and then I put it in the movement, and then something came back, and now I've got, I'm a bit lost, I'm not too sure. I thought I knew, but from that point of view, clearly I don't. And all of a sudden, you keep working, and you start to find meaning. So the earth is really looking, what's actually here. What is here done, finished? Water is processing. How can we process that information? How can we make sense within a context of what we've collected? But that's not going to be enough. We need to expand. So we need to do what? We need to brainstorm and ask questions and try to what are the options there is? And then we create. Then we find meaning, find creativity. All of this comes together. So when we are communicating to people, we usually in that stage of our communications, we are looking at Earth is about conclusions, is statements. This is it. That's it, full stop. There is absolutely no room for change. It's final. And we gotta learn to move it along and start to then move into what? Into associations. All right. So these are the conclusions within that boundary, but outside of that boundary, you start to now find associations where things are not so black and white. Things start to get into a little bit of a gray area, and then hopefully we find a bit of recognition. Once we expand, we start to recognize things and go, okay, it's not like this so precise and pinpointed, but there is some boundaries, there is some meaning. And then we start to find completeness. So just one more layer in our human cognition kind of framework that the mandala can help us to do is, a lot of people like to make decisions based on what? Based on data, based on research. Very valid, that's how science moves along these days. It's all about data, it's all about research. So we're basically making decisions from an earth type of perspective or force. So we can move that along and start looking at trends. So not only we have now data and research, but we have data moving through time, moving through life. So that allows us to make different kind of decisions, maybe better decisions, especially when we bring the two together. You know, some other people prefer to make decisions by making a huge list of everything that is possible, and then they start to rule them out. So that's that air consciousness where they go all the way to periphery and trying to envision all the possibilities. And finally, the fire consciousness is those people that just know. They just know, they just don't know how they got there. So basically they gotta walk backwards. And ideally, well, if we give it time and space, and if we work with that mandala, we start to see that we all do all of that, but we all have our comfort stages, or perhaps our patterns that we tend to always fall off into one or the other specific mode. And we gotta move it along, we gotta work with that, and we gotta move it along so we become more holistic. We are able then to see, if we are just stuck on the earth level, which seems to be where society is really stuck at the moment, and really valuing trying to find more data bits, if we move it along to see how those data bits are actually connected and how it moves, from that unique data bit, from that unique right, left toe of the bat that landed somewhere else, how is that related? And then the polarity, what is the flip side of it? Because we have to understand that everything has a flip side. As I've said on the previous talk, the physical world is embedded in polarities. So if we stay just on that one quantitative side, we must move away from that relationship of the quantity and flip it into the quality. And that will happen almost naturally by stretching and stretching and stretching. Usually there's a point where it flips. And then finally, we get this warm, fuzzy feeling. We get the warmth. It's unlimited. It's dynamic. We now are able to envision the whole. And we must be doing that because now we envision the whole, and then we come back into the uniqueness and we start that process again. So here we start to see a relationship which is much more, let's say, a bit more airy. There it's kind of a linear type of relationship. Now we start to see a bit more of a planar. Now it has another dimension. It's got a circular dimension where things are now moving in this direction, just kind of growing and growing and growing. We can then take it to even the next level, to a fire type of level, and we get to something like this. And that's where I really think that there is immense potential in Syntropic and in land management, where we are then able to bring a lot of information together and it starts to understand, how are things moving. So for example, we started here air, earth, fire, water, the same elements. But one thing that is very interesting that we really have to pay attention is that it is between those forces, let's say, between those elements, there is something that mediates the change. And that's what's written here in the blue. So dry mediates between fire and earth. Cool mediates between earth and water. Moist mediates between water and air. And warm mediates between air and fire. So my thinking is if we start to look at that, we can start to picture different types of climates and where are they, or perhaps just playing with the different seasons as well and how they are, and we can start to see, okay, so if we are here, we are starting to move into there. So usually we got here, we got summer, and then it starts to get into this earthy kind of autumn, and then it gets cooler and cooler, and then it gets into winter where it kind of gets moist, and then the spring comes and the air starts to move and the warmth starts to come, and off we go. And of course we have microcycles within macrocycles because we have the sun, but we also have the moon, and the moon is doing lots of, the moon is doing that whole macrocycle within a month, but it actually does 4 loops within that month. So it's 2 days, 2.5 days in each of those that we have opportunities. If we pay attention, we have opportunities to play and try to harness those qualities into our systems, into our planting. So are we going to plant here or are we going to plant there? Well, once we go even further, we start to look that the plants at Earth, they are really roots. In the earth, it's about the root. When it starts to move, it starts to go into the leaf. So water is about leaf, it's about life. And again, as you keep moving, you get into the flowery stage, the airy stage. Now things are refining, are starting to come to what? Into the fire, into the fruit. And what does the fruit do? It develops the seed, and the seed brings a new worth. The seed brings a new beginning that starts all again. But it's not all again, because every time there is a cycle, more information gets accumulated. And that's the importance of that fire process, because here we got information gathering, lots of data, lots of relationships. Now we move about and it's flowering and it's wonderful, but now we have to contract, we have to come down into the fire. And there is two options with the fire. We can either burn it and then burn and it becomes ash or salt and falls back into the earth as minerals, or we can cook it. And by cooking it, we are then able to bring all that information together, let the rubbish evaporate and move about, and we get left with the seed. We get left with the condensed information, really the coherent, the truthful element that show up out of that journey. And the more often we do that, the better. We can also even expand that and start to look at our rocks and our minerals and how they work into their equation. So roots are really associated with the lime, with that calcium. And as it starts to move up, we got potassium and feldspar, and keep moving up into the sodium. Now we get into the silica, which is pretty much the flip side of the lime. Now it's all about light, is relating to the top. So we have the quartz as our guidance there. And then it slowly starts to come down, starts to burn, starts to cook with sulfur and phosphorus, which will then come into what? Into those seeds, into those protein-rich foods that have been going through the whole cycle, ready to be eaten by human beings or to put back into the roots, into the earth, to keep on growing. So as a final perhaps idea that I would like to present it here on how this could work is trying to relate it back into holistic management, because they talk about the mineral cycle, the water cycle, the energy flow, and the community dynamics, which to me is very much associated with that principles of observing those key elements, those key forces, and understanding that they need to be in balance. We can't have a square where one side is huge and the other three is little. So, from that part here, we got that mineral cycle, which to me, the more I pay attention, seems to be a very limiting factor for a lot of people in the world. When they get really dry, really warm, how do we make that mineral cycle again? Because, here it's all about decomposition and digestion. So we are in this earth domain here of breaking things down, but it needs a bit of moisture. But it needs a little bit of moisture. So for a bit of moisture, we really need to work with our water cycle, meaning that we need our soils to be porous. We need the roots to go deep. We need those roots to go wide. That water cannot evaporate, not even for 2 milliliters. It's all about every drop, every dew drop that sits in there gets absorbed, because that will really help with that mineral cycle of bringing from that fire element back around. Without that moisture, which comes from what? From leaves as well, not only from the mulch and from the porous soil, but the water from the leaves, it really needs to bring it down here so we can keep on going with that digestion, with that decomposition. So once we got those going, then we get good energy flow as well. So the next level, so also related to leaf, so plants getting bigger. And when we talk about energy flow, so there is three basically parameters for us to work. For us to increase the energy, we want to do what? We want to increase the density of plants. We want to increase the time that those plants are photosynthesizing, and we want to increase the leaf area. So basically, what we are trying to move, we are moving to plants that are what? Deep-rooted, that have big, broad leaves, that are perennial. I mean, that is the goal. The more we can have that style of plant thriving, surviving, prospering, propagating, regenerating, reproducing, the better. So here we come to perhaps the most important part. It's kind of easy to bring minerals from outside and bring the hottery hoe and mush things about and have some proper density there, but this is the key for us, because this will really facilitate all of that. We can now do that mechanically perhaps, but without those guys, this collapse. So a lot of attention, yes, when we prepare our soils, we must prepare our beds as if the best we can, because we want to do it once and we want to fluff it up and we want to really bring some inputs if we bring in veggies and we don't have those resources. But we really need to look very, very carefully at our community dynamics, because without that, all of this starts to collapse. Very important. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I mean, there is a bit more information we can think about, carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and hydrogen and the forces of levity and gravity, but that is definitely beyond my understanding at the moment. One day perhaps I will go there, but I really wanted to present that to you because I think it's a very powerful tool in our decision making, especially when we are going out in our systems to manage it. Planning, designing, implementing, it's all good. It's quite easy. As long as we collect the right data sets and we put it within our context and we go out there and put it on the ground, then what? We need to observe and then we need to make decisions. And that, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, there is no book that can tell you how to make those decisions. Sure, we got framework, and holistic management for me is the best framework for that. We got those ideas, but out of that, you need to get out there, observe, and really sense your land. And really try to find where is the weakest link. And a lot of the time, the weakest link is here, either because we didn't put enough plants, or the plants that we did, maybe the life cycle, we didn't have plants that follow through strongly enough, or most likely our management of all the plants we put it up was not up to scratch, because we're still learning. That's fine. So the more plants we have, the better, the more options we've got to really keep that cycle moving, and we can really start to observe those different nuances and start to see where is the climate moving, where is the microclimate going, where is the moon moving, where is the sun moving. Once we have this clear picture within us and we can map it in here, we can start to make really good decisions. All right, I'll sow my seeds there, I'll harvest my flowers there, I harvest my fruits there, I really go for my roots. So we start to really individualize our production and get the best possible crop, but we are also increasing the influence and increasing the consciousness and really bringing our attention behind those phenomena. So we can truly get out of those external inputs and become free. To me, it's all about freedom. And to me, that's what Syntropic agriculture really offers. It's freedom in the short, medium, and long term. Well, I hope you enjoyed those series. I know that there is a lot of information there that I've shared. Thank you so much to follow all that through. Again, if you got questions, let me know. And for those that managed to come out to here, I can tell you one more thing. If you want, you can actually forget everything I've said, because there is one other way of making a very prosperous agroforestry, and that's by making it beautiful. If you engage with your agroforestry and making it a beautiful system for you, and for you, if you think beautiful is productive, if you think beautiful is colorful, if you think beautiful is community engaging, if you think it beautiful, whatever quality you want to bring, if you can make your agroforestry beautiful, then you'll be doing all of that. Because we all know, as soon as you get out in the garden and you will see plants that are looking sad, and you'll go, this is not quite beautiful, how can I make it better? Hope it helps. Make it beautiful. Much love, and I'll see you some other day. Take it easy. Bye.